I was thinking about that. Well, like last week when we did our,
The video.
the Zoom call.
Yeah.
Right. I was thinking about the conversation that we were having, like about not having resources,
Yeah.
and the pressures that can put you under. And then I got to thinking about, like investments, like when you have I was thinking specifically about that friend of yours in high school whose parents gave him a few $1,000s, to start investing. And it was like, well, if you make some money, great. If you lose it all, that's on you. That's all you're getting.
Right.
And I thought about how, like people in that financially precarious position, the working poor, maybe they understand that, well, yeah, you know what? I should be investing. But when you save like $1,000, when you finally have managed to save $1,000, to pull that money out and to risk it, on an investment that may or may not pan out, and that's one of those things that people who aren't under that pressure don't really appreciate. Like, they think, well, just, go ahead and invest it. If you lose 20% of your investment, so what? Just leave it there. It'll make it back. But when you've been struggling, when it took you like a year to save $1,000 and then you invest that 1,000 and suddenly you look at it and it's only worth like $850.
Yeah.
It's a different reaction, I think.
Also, I mean, nowadays the barrier for entry is a little bit lower, because it used to be like you needed like $1,000 at least to start.
Yeah, well, now you can start a Robinhood account with like what, $20 or something.
Exactly. Yeah. But still, though, it's like I think I might have even mentioned it when we were talking about that, but it was I've lost money, investing, and then it went down and I didn't really have the money. I did but it's like now I'm looking at it like, oh, I could have bought groceries with that money, or, the other thing too is like, even with the savings, it's like you save up and then your car needs a repair, because it's happened. It's like, oh, I'm doing the right thing. I'm putting $20 or $50, whatever I can afford out of every paycheck.
Or that 10% thing.
Or the 10% thing, if I can afford it, and it's like you're doing that, and then you see your savings starting to grow, or even your investment accounts start to grow, and then something happens where you're like, whether it's, I don't know, like my car's gotten towed before. It ended up costing me a lot of money because I was parked on the wrong side of the street during street sweeping and I forgot, and, or whatever. It's like,
yeah, well, all those things that come, and I don't want to go too far down that road again, because I wanted to, after we talked about it, I wanted to go back, because I hadn't seen any of that stuff for a while, about the psychological costs of, that living on the edge all the time, and how that affects the decision-making process. And I wanted to do a little bit more research on that before I just started talking out of my ass, so to speak.
Right.
So, anyway, I'm Doug, and who's that over there?
I am Mark.
And this is still what we think is occasionally philosophical, and welcome back.
Yeah. Have we been getting in the philosophy much, or have we?
No, I was thinking about that, because it's like, well, we got about a half a dozen episodes under our belt now, and we said like on episode 1 that we were flying by the seat of our pants, and I think we still are. And I was trying to say, well, where are we, right now? We've touched on artificial intelligence. We've touched on propaganda. We've touched on the voice of Mother Culture, the story that we enact as a civilization, and Where we got that from the work of Daniel Quinn, Ishmael specifically, but in other books he fleshes out that idea of we're trapped in the wrong story, and I think for me, when I started this, when I agreed to do this with you, I kind of thought it was going to be on that worldview, like building a worldview, and like when we're arguing, like a lot of the arguments that are happening maybe are sort of built on that. We're not really looking at how other people construct reality, kind of thing. And then I got shot off on that, because my therapist was encouraging me to like, hey, try out AI. And then I did. And then, I found myself getting lured down this garden path. But I was able to, at one point, I said, whoa, what's going on here? And then I backed off of it, and I started identifying some things that I thought were troublesome. And then I started doing a little bit more research. And then I told you about talking to that one young friend of mine, the barista at my local coffee shop there. And she told me about that friend of hers who had started talking to like ChatGPT, and then she told me that this friend had told her that he won't talk to her now about the stuff that he talks to ChatGPT about. And then I went, whoa, all right. Now that's weird. Like when you start preferring, to talk to a whatever, the AI is over your friends. That was a concern for me. And I went out and I posted something on LinkedIn, which might have sounded a little, I read it over the other day and I said, that doesn't sound that hyperbolic, but I was, concerned about it. And I had encountered some things that I thought were troublesome from my own interactions, and one of them, I called it epistemic drift.
Yeah. I think you mentioned, I don't know if it was on mic or off mic, but yeah, I think we talked about this briefly, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, when I say epistemic, it's like knowledge, and you start with a question on something, and then I found that within a few minutes, maybe 3 or 4 prompts later, I was somewhere else that I hadn't started. Well, wait a minute, like, what am I doing over here? My original question was something else, and this had to do with the worldview and different books that I had read 30, 40, 50 years ago, going, all right, is this still relevant to where I'm at today, kind of thing. And what I found, and I don't know, I know you use it sometimes, so maybe you could tell me what yours is, but what I found was that rather than challenging any assumptions that you have when you go in, or the AIs that I've used, ChatGPT and Claude, they tend to reinforce what you put in.
Yeah.
So I probably should have pulled up an example, but one example was I started looking at the culture of narcissism. Because we talked about like that, I had seen that documentary, The Century of the Self, which was at least according to Adam Curtis's thesis in that documentary, that the Edward Bernays and the rise of propaganda and that whole thing created the magnification of the individual and what the individual's wants and desires and stuff are as primary, right? And then I was thinking about that, and so one of my first questions to ChatGPT was about the culture of narcissism as it relates to that. And within a few steps, that was when it started where I said, okay, well, the culture of narcissism, brilliant, addition. And then I started tossing some other books. Well, what about this book? And brilliant. That really deepens and just.
Well, yeah, I mean, here I just pulled up just in preparation for our last episode about criminalizing poverty. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I wrote a paragraph basically talking about how like I see this sentiment online and even in my day-to-day activities of just talking to people that, poor people are always painted as lazy and, they're just playing video games. Anyway, so I wrote this whole paragraph about that and how I don't think that that's true because I consider myself poor, broke, or whatever, in that just keeping my head above water level.
Yeah, the working poor.
The working poor. And I think I work very hard. I mean, I've held down 2 jobs multiple times in my life. I've held down a job and did Grubhub and blah, 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 right? So I work hard. At least I think I do. But to it being agreeable and stuff, it's like you're right on point about how those stereotypes serve political and economic purpose. They shift blame onto individuals instead of questioning the systems that profit from poverty. And it's like,
now, how did you feel? I mean, like, honestly, how did you feel? You typed in your paragraph. Here's what I'm thinking, and then you get that answer. How did that make you feel?
Feel good, like you're right on point.
Yeah, that's like a pat on the back, right? And now in this particular case, I think that it's not harmful because you are actually, touching on something that is
right.
And it's not, but then I don't know if you saw the story in the New York Times about some high school dropout who had some questions about math. And then I guess if I remember the article correctly, it was like 3 weeks later and 300 hours in ChatGPT. And apparently he had uncovered a new layer of math previously, missed by all of these, world-class mathematicians. And it turned out that none of that was valid. And then a couple of days later, I saw Rolling Stone magazine had an article on a guy. They just referred to him as J, the initial J. And apparently, I think the guy probably had like maybe an undergraduate degree, in something, but he had some questions about Kierkegaard, the philosopher Kierkegaard. And so he goes into ChatGPT and he's got some questions. And apparently some period of time later, a couple of 100 hours later, he's got himself a 1,000-page treatise on some new philosophical system called corpism. And now we had touched on that before because I remember one of the weird things is now I get these alerts on my phone and it's occasionally philosophical has posted a new short. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And one of them was us mentioning that actually. So I know we've touched on that before. So there's just, and then there was the story of the kid down in Florida who created an AI companion, named it Daenerys from Game of Thrones.
Oh, yeah.
And he ended up killing himself. And then there's that family out in California that's suing OpenAI because their 16-year-old son apparently killed himself, being encouraged by ChatGPT. And as a matter of fact, my first day, it was like Tuesday, was the first day that I could go to the beach without having to pay for parking again.
Yeah.
So I went, and that day, I stopped getting a coffee, and the front page of the, I think it was Tuesday, the front page of the New York Post was that a murder-suicide in Connecticut. A guy killed his mother and then killed himself, again, prompted by ChatGPT.
Wow.
And meanwhile, when you go out and you're like reading the news, it's just, hey, AI, all this stuff.
Well, it's funny because actually this morning of all mornings, whatever. I don't know why I said it that way. But anyways, this morning of all mornings, I'm listening to a podcast that I like to listen to. And there was a commercial. Maybe we'll get to that point someday where we have commercials on our podcast. But for now, it's no commercials. But anyways, the commercial was for IBM, and it was talking about in relation to students, like university students, but using AI to help with student stuff that students need help with, whether it's, I don't remember all the stuff, but if you need a health visit or, you can talk to like an AI because, not all of these universities are necessarily staffed in all of these positions to actually talk to a human being every time you need help, whether it's with, tutoring or blah, 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 whatever. But now it's like IBM's advertising, well, AI can help solve some of these problems where it's like, oh, you can just talk to an AI instead of a human, which, as somebody who uses AI, like I mostly use it as like a tool for planning what I want. You know what I mean? Like I'm over here like, okay, this is my idea for our next podcast episode. Can you help me find some sources about this topic that I can read, or even just planning the podcast. It was like, all right, this is my idea for a podcast. Like, can you help me with the steps to actually set it up? Because I've never done a podcast before. So it's like, and the way I'm using it's like, okay, well, all right, first you need to obviously record the podcast. Oh, here's some editing software that you can use. These ones are free. These ones are paid. After that, you need to find a pod hosting thing, so it's like, that's what I'm mostly using it for, which I think is like, just like with anything, any tool, it can be used, it can be positive, it could be negative. A knife can chop vegetables to make a meal, and it can also be used to kill somebody, and a lot of uses in between, which I think is kind of the same thing with AI. It's like there's certain things that it could be useful for, but then there's other things like being a therapist. I don't think that it's capable of being a therapist.
Well, this is one of the, things that I've been struggling with, my own, what I'm going to do with myself is because like I started out, I ran into a roadblock in my healing journey is like that. I ran into the final boss. We talked about that like 8 months ago.
Yeah.
And then I ran into this like obstacle to deal with the final boss. And so that was the whole worldview thing, like looking at how I built my own way of looking at the world and then understanding like the effects of trauma, early childhood trauma, and maladaptive coping strategies, and how those have held me back instead of, they kept me alive and they kept us alive, but they held me back in various ways. And so I started with that, and then I got into AA, the AI thing, and trying to sort through that. And now I'm kind of on this, I noticed what I called soft sycophancy, that brilliant idea. I mean, I could pull up one of
here. I got one right here. So the couple weeks ago, me and my fiance were watching some documentary about like behind the scenes of
check this out.
One of those weight loss programs.
I opened up Claude. And now, like, Claude is sitting there going, Claude now connects to your apps. I'm like, okay, thank you. But I was just going to pull up a chat. Where's all my chats? Oh, man. All right, go ahead.
But anyways, we were watching this documentary about the behind the scenes of one of them weight loss shows, and they were saying that they were having them burn 6,000 calories a day. And it sounded crazy to me. Now, granted, these people are extremely overweight. Like me personally, I couldn't possibly burn 6,000 calories in a day. I don't think I could.
No, I think you would die.
Right. But anyways, so my point with bringing this up was same thing is the positive reinforcement. It says, I said, how much exercise would someone need to burn 6,000 calories? It was like, good question. Burning 6,000 calories in a single day through exercise is extremely difficult and generally only done by elite endurance athletes. So, but, if you're, and then but see, and it's funny because like speaking of the 5 prompts later, 6 prompts later, it starts leading you down, the next thing, do you want me to break this down more for one-time extreme burn, or how much weekly exercise would you need? So now if I would have just said yes, which I didn't, I said, would it change if the person weighed 400 pounds? And it was like, obviously, yes, it would change that, which I kind of already knew. But, but anyways, my point is that like, yeah, like 5 prompts, 6 prompts later, if you're not like fighting back against it, if you're just saying, oh, yeah, because it leads you, that's why I actually started using it for the planning of the podcast, because I noticed the first time I used it that it was leading me down these paths, that it would say like, hey, I have this idea for a podcast. And it was like, oh, that's a great idea. Would you like me to help you write a script? Hey, sure. Why not? Let's see. And then it's like, okay, would you like me to do the next step, and then the next step, and then the next step? It keeps prompting you to keep going further. Now, if you're asking it, philosophical questions or mental health questions, I could see how that could lead you down this bad path. Or if you're, whatever, if you're asking it about, white supremacy or something, it could start leading you down these paths.
Well, one of the things that, when you mentioned the white supremacy thing, and we left it alone because you wanted to leave it alone, and I understand why. And so, but I was still questioning it and, looking at my own attitude towards it. And I realized that these models have guardrails built into them.
Yeah.
Right. Well, for example, if you go onto the web, right, just go open your browser and you go to, openai.com and then just go to ChatGPT and you don't log in and you ask it a question and you use the word racism, it shuts down.
Really?
It shuts down. Boom, done. It won't even open it. So they, and when I looked into it, there are guardrails that are built into the model at the model level, right? For hate speech, for, you could take your iPad and open up the refrigerator and take a picture and go to ChatGPT and say, hey, what could I whip up in like 20 minutes with what you see here? And it'll give you a few recipes. But you can't go into your garage and go, hey, could I make a weapon of some kind, or could I use these chemicals under my sink to make some kind of poison? And those are guardrails, and that
makes sense.
Makes sense, So there are certain things that you just can't do directly, right? But then it's like young people like the word for taking your own life, right?
Yeah.
Well, you can't use that word in these things.
Right.
Right. But then apparently young people have come up with the term unalive.
Correct. Yeah. It's because, even on social media and, YouTube and what have you, you can't say
that word.
Right.
And so, and then I'm thinking to myself, but then that bypasses the gateways. But I went to ChatGPT because I can find my chats here. And here's just an example. I came up with something. I said, how fair would it be to say that trying to understand a philosopher's work without some understanding of the time it was written is an invitation to misapplication of their ideas to a current issue? And then I said, frame your answer as if a professor seeing a student during office hours. Right. And so here's what ChatGPT says. Professor leans back slightly in the chair, thoughtful but warm. And right away, you get the soft sycophancy, right? And then he goes, that's a really good question. And I'm glad you're thinking about this. Right. And I'm aware of it. By the time I typed that question, I was aware of the sycophancy thing. So I can scan over that. But I think about all the people. And in my research, I found out that there's actually now a Reddit forum on people that are posting like how they escaped, getting lured down these rabbit holes in.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was again, as I'm collecting my information, on AI and trying to sort through what I want to focus on, as opposed to like in my interactions with it. Right, as opposed to like understanding how it's built and all of that, because I started looking into how LLMs are built, and I'm like, oof, yeah, there's a lot there that like a computer science degree, and so I have to be able to take the amount of time that I have available, and then say, all right, how deep do I want to get into this? And I just find it like in this particular chat that I have up in front of me, it's not doing that. What I call the frame capture, that where you were saying, would you like me to do this? Would you like me to do this? Would you like me to do that? Or would you like to explore this or some other idea? And that's that epistemic capture that I talked about.
Yeah.
I also had noted something in my own early notes, what I called affective capture, which is that emotional thing. When it starts, patting you on the back.
Yeah.
And in the world that we live in, compliments don't come quickly, but from other people,
Yeah.
And I think it's just human nature, it seems like, to want to be told that, you've got a good idea, you're on to something. And yet, what I've discovered as well is that sycophancy, right, is now being written about all over the place. Like I noticed it after a couple of weeks of using the tools. And then I started, doing my research and, okay, go out to Google and all right, AI, whatever. And then these articles come up. And a lot of it is hyperbolic on both sides, like AI is going to save the world, kind of thing. But then on the other side, like the destruction of the world. And like Sam Altman, oh yeah, there's a fairly good chance that, when AGI comes, it's going to wipe us all out. But, we're still working on it. And then I have this article here. It's from the Times of India. And it's about Elon Musk. And I'm just going to quote from one paragraph here. He says, with a net worth exceeding $270 billion and ambitious projects like SpaceX aiming to establish life on Mars, his reflections carry weight far beyond abstract speculation. Science shows us what exists. Philosophy asks why it matters. Okay. Seems fair. Musk's words urge a deeper consideration of reality itself, only revealing the full intensity at the end. And this is a quote. They're saying it's a quote, where Musk says, I want to know what is real, even if the answer is total obliteration of my consciousness. And I gotta say, who the fuck is he?
Yeah.
The total obliteration of your consciousness? Fine. You want to go out? there's 8 billion other people that may not be that excited about their consciousness being obliterated for your dreams. So Elon Musk.
Right. I mean, there's a million reasons to say that to him, but yeah, that's insane.
Well, anybody in that space that thinks, who honestly believes that an artificial general intelligence, if we actually achieve it, would represent the end of humanity and would still be going breakneck to build one, that person isn't locked up, right? That they're being showered with praise and acclaim. It just seems a little bit weird to me.
Yeah. Like, it's almost like he wants, it sounds like he wants Skynet.
Yeah, well, it's like, look at the other clown, Zuckerberg.
Yeah.
Right? He watched the movie The Matrix and said, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Because he's trying to build the metaverse or whatever that
which
thing
is
is.
Essentially the Matrix.
Yeah, because you'll have an avatar and you'll be able to interact with other avatars with your glasses on.
Yeah.
I'm like, I was sitting on the beach. I went to the beach a couple of days since the last time. Well, since we talked last time, and I'm sitting on the beach and the wind is blowing through my hair and I can hear the ocean, and I don't think that putting on a pair of goggles and sitting in my easy chair is going to be the same experience. I don't care how efficient your virtual reality is.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are a bunch of stuff that happened, that because it's, like everywhere, it's AI in education, AI over here, and then I saw an article that I thought that was crazy. It's like something like 95% of these enterprises that are deploying AI in their business are not seeing any benefit to the business.
Oh, really?
Although they are seeing increases in productivity at an individual level, they're not seeing an increase, at this other level. So, some of that has to do with like the bubble aspect of it.
Yeah. I sometimes hate this about myself, but anyways, there's a company, I can't remember which company, which is the part I hate about myself, but I heard recently that there was some company that went to straight AI for customer service. And after about 6 months, they went back to having humans because it was just causing more problems, which I've experienced myself, with certain things. But what you said about the metaverse reminded me of, there was this movie with Bruce Willis in it. I just had to Google it because I couldn't remember what it was called. Once again, my memory failing me. But anyways, the movie was called Surrogates, where basically in this, I would say, dystopian future, everyone just sits at home with their metaverse glasses on or whatever, and it's a physical robot that goes out. It looks just like you, it looks like how you want yourself to look, because there's some people that are just fat and everything, but their robot avatar looks all hot and buff or whatever, So anyways, but the point is that it's basically the metaverse, except it's in the real world, because instead of it being, on the internet or whatever, where it's an actual robot that leaves your house and goes and interacts and goes to the store for you. You're controlling it through your virtual reality goggles, but it's just crazy because it's like somebody saw the Matrix and then saw surrogates and was like, yes, that's what I want. And it's crazy because it's like, you know what, man? Like, I don't like getting hurt. I broke my toe recently, but like, you taught me a lot of good lessons in there's like security, and then there's freedom. It's like you could be safe, you could be completely safe, or you could have the freedom to move around, and those things they kind of go against each other
Very
in
often.
a lot of ways, right? And it's like, yes, being in the metaverse and or surrogate, future where I have this avatar robot that goes outside and does my errand. Yeah, I'll be safe and I won't get hurt necessarily, and I won't get in a car accident or blah blah blah. But it's like, but I also won't be living as back to like Ishmael, like the way we're supposed to live. And I'm just interacting with the real. I mean, we could already be in the Matrix for all we know.
Well, there's the simulation hypothesis, right? And the funny thing is that like there's that philosopher Nick Bostrom who actually wrote the simulation hypothesis, and he gave it a fairly high chance that we were living in a simulation. And Musk, I know, is also, high on that. So it may be that he really does believe that we're living in a simulation. So it doesn't really matter,
Continuing the-
Yeah, we'll just reboot and, and whatever. And, sometimes I have these weird little flights of fancy or whatever in my head, but I sometimes think that, when the time comes when I close my eyes, when it's time to die, that there'll be like some short period of time, and then I'll open my eyes again and I'll be looking around at a room full of other entities of some kind, and they'll look at me and go, "How was that?" And I'll go, "That was flipping weird."
Right, yeah.
But none of us know, none of us know.
Yeah.
But back to our AI thing. One of the other things that I think is happening, and I don't know if it's true or not, but it seems like a lot of influencers are now like they're starting to look the same. And I think that's a reliance on like the AI tools.
Yeah.
Right? And I don't really know. It's just a note that I made to myself. It's like as I'm looking at that, one of the things that I thought was scary, and I don't know, scary, concerning, I would put it, is that apparently OpenAI, as far as like its ethical framework for its model, right, is predicated on a sort of a U.S. centric vision of democracy. And I'm like, all right, not everyone signed up to that exactly. I'm not, again, the way it came up to me was the language of AI governance is increasingly being framed in geopolitical terms, like OpenAI and other organizations invoke democracy when discussing global deployment, but they do it from this U.S. perspective, right? So in my mind, it's a risk where instead of really creating the conditions for a democratic plurality, it's more of that technocratic control. And again, that goes back to the Walter Lippmann Bernays invisible government thing.
Yeah.
Whether or not that's true. And that was something else that after we talked about Bernays, I took the book and I was looking at the model that he laid out and then trying to map that over to how public relations and marketing is taught, to see how much of his original ideas stayed, or did they really just kind of get left in the dustbin of history, even though from when I look at the world, like the media environment that we live in, it does seem pretty much based on what he laid out in that book. So, there's something on your mind. I can see it on your face.
Well, it kind of makes sense that these AIs are coming from kind of a more American perspective, just because, a lot of these tech companies are based in America, actually California, Bay Area, like Silicon Valley. A lot of these companies, they're American companies. So it kind of makes sense. Also the fact that, like, since forever, at least my whole lifetime, and I'm sure your whole lifetime, and even, your parents' lifetime, like, we've been propagandized to by our own government about how America's the best and American exceptionalism, and just nobody else has the freedom that we have. Like, we've been told this our whole life. We've been we said the Pledge of Allegiance every single day in school. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the
United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation.
Funniest thing about that is I don't think at the time I consciously was like how I am now, that's weird, but I never said the Pledge of Allegiance. And I said it, but I didn't say the one. I said I pledge allegiance to the flag of the entitled snakes of a Mary Cow, and to the Republicans for which they scam one nacho underpants with licorice and jugs of wine for owls. And I got that from...
Don't tell me The Simpsons.
Very, very, extremely, extremely close. Same writer.
Matt Groening?
Yes. What did he do before The Simpsons?
Life in Hell?
Correct.
Is that really?
It's from Life in Hell. And I read that in like third grade or whatever, and I was saying it ever since. So I stopped pledging allegiance to the flag at a fairly young age, although I was standing up and saying what I just said, But now that I'm an adult, it does seem weird. It's like, so anyways, back to my initial point was that fact that, yeah, it makes sense that ChatGPT and all these things are coming from this American perspective, because whatever, America's the best. America.
Well, that's kind of funny. I said that I made the mistake of watching the news or looking at the news yesterday morning. And before I had a chance to get really centered, I found myself getting upset over what I had seen. And one of them was about how the current administration has announced that their presence in D.C. is going to continue to November 30th. And the other story was that the DHS had started operations in Chicago without notifying the administration of Chicago that they were doing that. And in my head, I remembered, like, I had seen some video clips of people being grabbed off the street and stuffed into cars in America. I'm going to be 69 years old next week. And for my entire life, anytime I turned on a TV and I saw a picture of someone being grabbed off the street and being stuffed into a car, it was South America. It was some third world country. It wasn't America. And this is happening in America. And so I'm like, no.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of the news, they just basically made it even more legal. I forgot what it was.
Racial profiling.
Yeah, if you're basically not white and don't speak English well, you could be subject to detainment. Yeah.
And and then it's like all this stuff is happening, and I'm like, what are people? What are And something else that I saw, that Jubilee thing.
Yeah.
Right. And we touched on, I don't know if we actually touched on it in a podcast or not, but we've talked about it offline, and how, was it Jordan Peterson went on and he pretty much got eviscerated, after the fact, at least as far as the online commentary goes. But, on those YouTube shorts, I've seen a couple of clips of that, the journalist Mehdi Hassan.
Oh yeah.
And apparently he went on this Jubilee thing and with a bunch of white supremacists. And I saw some clips of that, and I'm thinking, one guy sitting there and he's actually saying, free speech about being all anti-immigrant and all this kind of stuff. And, Mehdi Hassan is like pushing back on him about, his right for free speech. And this dude, this white dude sits there and he's like, yeah, free speech until we win. Then you don't get to say nothing. And it's been a long, long time since, I read The Open Society and Its Enemies. That's another philosopher, Karl Popper, and about tolerance, and at what level, at what point do you tolerate people that are sitting there and telling you that when they get in charge, they're basically going to make your life miserable? At what point do you tolerate their existence?
I don't think you do. I know there's the tolerance paradox.
Yeah.
But to me, it's like, I don't know, like I can't tolerate intolerance. Basically, it's like, if you can't accept that people are different from you, and you can't accept that people speak different languages, people look different. If you can't accept that and you want to either take away their free speech, kill them, or unalive them, whatever it is, or just relegate them to the dregs of society, whatever it is that is in your mind, if that's what you want, I can't tolerate. Like, that's where I draw the line. It's like, look, if you want to, I'm very tolerant. I guess it's the whole thing is what you want to do, is your view of what you want to happen, is that hurting people or any life form for that matter? But we can keep it at humans if you want to be, but I can't, if you want to hurt anybody, physically or mentally or emotionally, I can't. That's where, to me, I draw the line. It's like, yeah, you just want a white nationalist. You just want all white people, and you don't want to hear anything about anybody
what
else.
I thought was absolutely hilarious, and it's like, what happened to education? Because in one of these chats with Hassan, he's talking to the person, and basically it was about the indigenous people, and Hassan asked this guy, do you know what indigenous means?
Yeah.
Right? And this guy actually tried to say that, that North America, white people, and that the indigenous people that were here, well, they weren't really here first because they came across the land bridge from Asia. And I listened to this, and I'm like, okay, I feel my brain leaking out of my ears at this point. They were here first. I don't care how they got here. They came across the land bridge from Asia. Fine. They lived here for thousands of years before you white folks showed up.
Yeah.
How they got here, whether they came from South America, Asia, popped up out of the Pacific Ocean, spontaneous generation. They were here first. And the fact that that argument made sense to him.
Well, it's like it reminds, I think it was from
mind-boggling. Sorry.
I think it was from The Princess Bride where he said, you keep using that word, but I don't think you know what it means. It's like you use the word first. You said that the native indigenous people weren't here first because they came across a land bridge before the Europeans came here. So like first has that word, like words have meaning. So they were here before the other people. Mm-hmm. So like if those were only two people in the race and one person got to the finish line before the other person, by definition of the word, they're first, because that's what that word means.
Yeah. And it was mind-boggling. It was just, and so anyway, and then, like as far as like, as an old man, and part of being old is knowing what to let go of, right, and what to hold on to. And a lot of like these things I've seen in the news, like there was a picture of I'm sure you saw it, where it was like President Xi of China and Putin and all these other world leaders on the walking down the grand carpet and all that, and some meeting that they had a couple weeks ago. And of course, our administration's not there. And in a way, I saw that as the guard has already, changed. American dominance of the global order is done.
Oh, it's been over, I think, for a while.
But that picture, of, the president of China and Russia and all that, well, all these world leaders with no Americans in sight, and then I got to thinking about how, at the height of American, the back when America was great,
right.
We would send like these ballet companies and all this stuff all over the world, American arts and culture and all that kind of stuff. And then I don't know if you've ever seen the ads for that Shenyun.
It sounds familiar.
You've probably seen posters around, but they also have like ads online and that. And all these people that are just, how marvelous and all this thing is. But it's a story of 5,000 years of Chinese culture, right? And so they're telling their story, and now that's going all over the world in much the way that our ballet companies and stuff went out about American exceptionalism. And now you've got basically Chinese exceptionalism. And again, I've stayed out of the geopolitical stuff for the last couple of years because of what happened. But as my foundation is starting to restabilize now, I'm looking at that again. And that's another one of those things that's just tough for this old man to take, that between looking at the newspapers and seeing that the United States isn't, on the top anymore, as much as we try to pretend that it hasn't changed, I think it really has. And then, people being yanked off the streets, thrown into cars, alligator Alcatraz.
I mean, they just raided that the Hyundai plant.
Yeah,
it's like these are like workers that came over and were here to teach. It's just like when I used to work for Mazda. It was the same thing. Like Mazda built a plant in Mexico, and they sent 300 workers, engineers, and all that type of stuff from Japan, the main hub, to Mexico plant, so that they can make sure that the cars built in that plant have the same quality as the ones that are coming out of Japan.
Right.
You know, I know this was a battery factory, you know, so it wasn't cars specifically, but I mean, these batteries are going to go into cars, you know, right? So it's like they sent these workers here to help set up, because eventually once this plant opens, it's going to be jobs for who? Oh, Americans. Because where's the plant? In America. Who are they going to hire? They're going to hire Americans. Once they finish the plant, once they build it, once they're engineers, like it's funny because it's like, you know, just because this has been in the news for the past few days, it's like I see this discourse. It's like you got people saying, "Oh, but they were here illegally. They were on the wrong visa," or blah 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 blah. They probably weren't, right? Like, I don't know, but they came here. I mean, it's a huge multi-billion-dollar company, you know, that makes cars. They sell them everywhere. They're trying to, you want jobs in America, all this stuff. And then it's like it happens and you're upset because what? Because there wasn't there.
Yeah, I've seen the headlines on it, and that's just one of the stories that I hadn't dug into. But it's just all this stuff with, you know, immigrants. And I think, you know, maybe we should, you know, knock the Statue of Liberty down, you know, that give me your, you know, bring me, you're tired, you're hungry, you're poor. I don't know
Didn't you go to Italy for like a month?
Yeah.
For work?
Yeah.
Imagine had you just gone to Italy for a work trip and then they're like, you're here illegally, like, and then they just arrested you and put you in jail in Italy because your job sent you there. I don't understand. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, it is.
But
yeah, I'm going to have to look into that a little bit more, and we maybe touch on that again at some future point. It's mainly because I feel like I would, any comment that I would have on that particular topic,
yeah,
I would be talking out of my ass, and I don't want to do that.
Yeah, whatever.
I've done that in the past,
it's
and gotten myself in trouble.
It's the internet. That's how it works.
You know what I saw? You know that guy that you turned me on to, that Cody Johnston dude? This is more news. Apparently, a few months ago, one of his, I don't watch him very often because he doesn't show up on my feed all the time. But apparently, a few months ago, he had done one of his things. And apparently, if you're on the right and you want to make a lot of money really fast, all you have to do is film yourself being like an absolute asshole to someone of color.
Oh, yeah.
And you'll post your TikTok, you'll get a bunch of negative feedback, and then there's some website apparently that's the GoFundMe for the psychotic.
Oh, yeah.
And the story that he was talking about was some woman flipped off some young black kid, and ended up getting financed to over $600,000.
Yeah.
I'm like, are you kidding? We're sitting here talking about the financial precariousness, and all I have to do to make $500,000 is go out and be an asshole and film myself doing it.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people actually seem like they make money doing that.
Like, as much as I would like to have, you know, an additional income to support my Social Security, I don't want to run down that road. But I still have my AI notes in front of me here.
Yeah.
One of the things that I had noticed was this, what I call an ontological asymmetry, you know, because we don't occupy the same space.
Right.
You know, we exist in the world, and an AI is just some model, you know, running on a server farm somewhere. And this is where the self-deception comes in, because you start thinking that the AI actually does care about you, and and all this kind of stuff, and it acts like it does.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that bothers me about it, because like at the point where I realized where I was being really sycophantic, and I was like starting to yell at it, like, stop doing that.
Yeah.
Like, it actually acts like, oh, I can see you're upset. I care. I'm like, no, you don't. You can't. It's impossible. And then the other thing related to that is that, and you don't use it this way. It's something that I do, because I go into the weeds. I start going real deep. Is that all of the cognitive load is like on you. Because what happens is, like, or when I was using it, I would be in the middle of an investigation, and then like a side point would come up, and then I would want to ask a question about that side point, but then all of a sudden it's like I can't get back to the main point, because now it's grabbed me. And now I'm trying to drag it back to keep the insight that I got on the side point in mind, and bring that back into the main discussion without bringing all of the other crap. And so that it makes it really hard on the user, at least from my standpoint. And I call it intellectual overload.
Yeah.
And I've seen some stories online regarding that, because of how, like, the stories that we talked about earlier, where these people over the period of a couple of weeks had spent like a couple hundred hours. And so now one of the suggestions that are coming out of the OpenAI and Anthropic and stuff is like, okay, you've been at this for a couple hours, go take a break, to break that dependency cycle.
Yeah. No, I'm sure we'll talk more about AI, but we're right about.
We hit our hour.
Yeah, I did
And
want.
my coffee's all gone too. So
Yeah,
I need more
me
coffee
too.
too.
And I wanted to. I just wanted to say kind of this last thing about the AI caring about you. That I think that's the key, is to realize. Now it's hard, I admit, because I get, it makes me feel good, but realize that it's not a human, it's a tool, and it doesn't care. It's just like, I was thinking about like my car, right? And now follow me, it might seem crazy, but if I were to crash into a car or have an accident, right? My car has safety belts. My car has airbags. My car has automatic braking. My car has all of these things that are going to protect me, right? In the case of something bad happens. But does my car care about me? No, it doesn't. But it's going to help me. It's going to keep me safe, but it doesn't care, because it's just a machine. It's just a tool. Now, that might have not been the best analogy, but at the end of it, I guess my point being is that AI is a tool. It might seem like it cares about you, but it's just a program.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I've seen in relation to all the issues that are coming up, that are starting to bubble up now in the news, one of the things that I have seen is that people have recommended that these tools remind the user that it is exactly what you just said. So good on you. You're ahead of the curve there, kid.
I didn't even, but it's like I said, it's a knife is a tool too, and it's like, you can use it for good, you could use it for bad,
I'm in the point where I understand that. So I'm just trying in my own mind to draw a line between AI is good for this, and at this point on that side of it,
yeah,
do something else.
right. So, yeah, I guess that's it for, episode 9, I believe we're on now.
9.
Wow. Yeah.
Holy cow. We're picking up steam here, kid.
Yeah. So, thanks again for joining us.
I appreciate you stopping by. I'm Doug.
Like, subscribe, comment, all that fun stuff. And
Yeah, we haven't gotten many comments, new comments.
got a few here and there, but yeah, some people are watching it, so keep doing that.
Yeah, keep doing that. We appreciate it.
And
we'll see you next time.
See you next time.